I was constantly told growing up to stay away from credit cards. My parents would say that they encourage bad spending habits and that I should only be spending money that I have. And while that wasn't bad advice, the more I learned about credit cards, the more I realized that a lot of that fear simply stemmed from their own lack of knowledge or past struggle with debt. So when I turned 17, I learned everything I could about credit cards, including how to effectively use them to build credit and maximize some really cool rewards. So this video is going to be a complete beginner guide to credit cards, building credit with credit cards, and maximizing their use in your daily and future life. I've broken this video up into several different parts that's going to cover all fundamental information. I've also put all the timestamps in the description, and I'll also put it on the screen for your reference. By the end of the video, you're going to have a good sense of how to use a credit card, how to improve your credit score with them, my own personal advice to maximize their use, and finally get some answers on some common misconceptions. Of course, if I get anything wrong or maybe something is updated, please feel free to correct me in the comments below. So without further ado, let's get into it. So firstly, what is credit and why do we use credit cards? To answer this question, I'm going to give you guys some basic definitions that you're just going to need to be able to understand why we use credit cards and how credit cards fit in the grand scheme of your credit profile. So to begin, credit is a financial trust system based off of your own ability to repay a lender's money back. A credit card is a line of credit where you borrow money from a bank, credit union, or financial institution. A credit profile is different from your credit score. I really want to emphasize that. I think when a lot of people hear a credit score, they automatically assume that that is your credit profile, that number encompasses your entire credit profile. Your credit score is just one component of your credit profile. Your credit profile includes obviously your payment history, all your loans, all your lines of credit, and your credit score. The reason why I really want to emphasize that is because this video is going to be going over credit cards. And so while I'm going to be giving advice on improving your credit score using credit cards, at the end of the day, there are other things that go into your credit profile. And so I'm not going to be going over auto loans, home loans. That's going to be for a future video. There are other ways to increase your score that doesn't include using credit cards. The next thing that you're going to need to know is what a statement is. So a statement is a monthly summary of a card's transactions, running balance, interest, payment dates, pretty much just your overall credit card activity. Now you're going to get a statement every single month. And usually statements are from a certain date to another date. Usually people edit their statement dates so they end at like the end of the month or maybe at the same time of their other cards. A good way to look at statements is like a screenshot of all your activity on the card. So if your statement ends on January 20th, then your statement is going to start when your last statement ended, right? So December 20th, and then it's going to end on January 20th. And so it's going to take a screenshot of everything that you bought during that time. And it's basically how you track all the activity on your credit card. Now, carrying a balance is a term used to describe when you don't pay your full statement amount by the due date. So what that means is, let's say your statement amount is $10 and you only pay $2. So that $8 is going to roll over to your next statement if you don't pay it, obviously. And so that is when APR kicks in. So APR is your annual percentage rate. That's basically how much extra you're charged if you carry a balance. So your APR is your annual percentage rate. So that's not going to be how much you're charged every single day. So what you can do is you can divide your APR by 365 to find out how much your daily APR is. And I do want to clarify that you're not really going to have to worry about your APR percentage, just because as long as you're paying things on time and you're using things efficiently and correctly, you're not going to be paying anything extra on your card. And so that's honestly the most common misconception with especially like parents and the older generations, is that they think that just using a credit card costs money, and it does not. As long as you pay things on time, you're paying it before the due dates, then using a credit card is completely free and you're going to get just value out of it. So that kind of leads me into the second part of the question, which is why do we use credit cards? So you can get a credit card as soon as you turn 18 or become a legal adult. And because of that, you can begin building your credit history as soon as you become an adult. Now, my personal favorite incentive of using a credit card are the rewards and cashback that you can get. So the majority of credit cards offer some kind of either reward points or cashback. So just for an example, I'm going to say that a credit card offers 1% back on every purchase. What that means is that if I go and buy something for $100, then I'm going to get 1% of that $100 back to me. So I'm going to get $1 in cash back. Now I can then usually cash that out straight to my statement, maybe get a little discount on my statement, or I can just put it in my bank account. I can invest it. I can do anything I want with that money. And like I mentioned, some cards have reward points instead. Chase and American Express are examples of these, where instead of getting just pure cash back, you'll get reward points where you can spend those on flights, trips, and just get a lot of redemption value out of them. So another hidden benefit of credit cards is protection from fraud. So I mentioned before that a credit card is line of credit where you're borrowing money from a bank. What that means is when you swipe a credit card or you just use it in any situation, you need to remember that you're using the bank's money. You're using their money in that moment. That money is not coming out of your personal account. The reason why this is important is because when it comes to fraud or instances where maybe your credit card's taken, your account information is leaked, or just someone else gets a hand on your information and is using your card, people have found that credit card companies are just much more willing to get these things fixed and get those charges disputed than going through a checkings account and having to argue why those things are not you. And finally, another benefit that might be a bit controversial is funds in case of an emergency. Now, I don't see this benefit often listed just because obviously no one really wants to be using a credit card in case of an emergency, but I did want to put it out there that that is an option. Look, life happens, and I think we really shouldn't shit on anyone for having to use a credit card in a tough situation. Whether that means, I don't know, your tire went out, you need to pay for a new tire, something in a medical emergency, like there are tons of situations where you might need to pay out of pocket for something and you may not have those funds at the moment. Now, obviously, I'm not incentivizing anyone to use their credit card irresponsibly. I'm just saying that in the case of an emergency, you do have those funds there with a credit card. So now that we've gone over all those basic terms, we're going to go over what makes up a credit score. So how credit scores work is the credit card providers send your statements and your account information to the credit bureaus. So what are the credit bureaus, you ask? Essentially, they are credit reporting agencies that then use scoring models to determine your overall credit score. So Experian, TransUnion, Equifax are the three credit bureaus, and while you don't have to memorize those names right now, it is important to keep in the back of your head just because for future calculating of your scores, you're going to see why it's important to look at different types of scores. So your FICO score is the most widely used credit scoring model. So when you apply for more lines of credit, they're going to usually look at your FICO score. Now for loans, this will change up a bit. Usually when you're applying for a loan, or maybe you're looking at some houses and they need to run your credit, or maybe you're looking at cars, they might use a different score, such as like a Vantage score, or there are just many different scoring models, but for the most part, your FICO score is the most widely used one, and that's the one you're going to be seeing the most often. So to kind of summarize that, essentially the credit card providers take all your information that is in your monthly statement and then sends those to the credit bureaus. The credit bureaus then use the FICO scoring model to make your score. So FICO scores can range anywhere from 300 to 850 being the max. Now there are definitely certain ranges. So anything below 580 is seen as like a poor score. Anything between 580 to 670 is fair. 670 to 740 is good. 740 to 799 or 800 is very good. Anything above 800 is seen as exceptional. Now when you begin building credit, you're not going to start off with an 850. I think a lot of people think that, since I haven't made any late payments, I haven't done anything wrong to my credit, then I should start off with a good score. Now that's not really the case. You're going to start off with a pretty decent score, maybe anywhere from, high 500s to mid 600s, but you're going to be nowhere near the 800s to start off. So what exactly makes up your credit score? Like what determines that number? So there are 5 criteria that I'll put on the screen as well. So it's your payment history, your amount of debt or your utilization, your history length, your credit mix, and then new inquiries. So your payment history is the one that makes up the most of your credit score. It is 35%. This is essentially if you're paying your statements on time. Now your utilization is essentially how much of your credit limit you're using every statement. So let's say you apply and get approved for your first credit card. You're given a credit limit of $100. You then go and spend $10. Then once your statement posts, you're going to be shown on your statement that you spend $10 out of $100. Your utilization is 10 out of 100 or 10%. Now, generally, if you want the highest score you can possibly get, you want to keep your score between 1 and 10%. However, this leads into the most common misconception that I hear from people who just use credit cards, which is that utilization is permanent. That is completely false. Utilization is temporary. What that means is that every single statement, your utilization is going to be recalculated. And so because it makes up the second most part of your score, a lot of people will panic and think that, shoot, I spent 90% of my credit limit this month and my score dropped, 20 points. Does that mean that my score is going to keep going down? Did I screw myself up? No. Okay. Please remember that utilization is temporary and that every single statement every month, it's going to recalculate it. And so if you spend 90% of your limit, let's say you spend $90 out of your 100 limit, your credit score might go down in that next month. That doesn't mean it's going to permanently keep going down. In the next statement, if you, let's say, spend $5 out of the $100, your score is going to shoot straight back up and it's going to be as if you lost no score at all. And so what this essentially means is that you need to be mindful of your utilization, but it's not going to make or break your score in the long term. So what this means is that you need to be mindful of your utilization. However, don't panic if 1 month your score goes down a little bit and 1 month your score goes up a little bit and it just kind of fluctuates. Just remember that keeping it between 1 and 10% is going to show you your highest score, but that can always change. And so I just always suggest, if you're going to be applying for a new credit card, applying for loans, doing anything you're with your credit score where someone's going to be looking at it, then dropping your utilization. Once you start getting more cards and once your credit limits are increased, your utilization will begin to be padded by more of that credit limit. In the example I used before, let's say you spent, again, $10, but let's say this month your credit limit was increased from $100 to $200. That $10, instead of being out of $100, is now going to be out of $200. And so instead of the 10% you're going to see on your utilization, it's going to be 5%. And so what that means is that obviously as you get more credit cards, as your credit limits are increased, your utilization is just naturally going to go down over time. So that's why I tell people, really, like, if you're just starting off, don't worry too much about your utilization. Pay your card on time and in full, and in the long run, your score is going to go up. Now, the third most important part of what makes up your credit score is the history length. So the history length makes up 15% of your score. It's essentially how long your lines of credit have been open. This just means that having a credit card open is going to continue to help your score over time. This also means, though, that if you open a credit card and you have a very short history, let's say you've only had it for 1 year, and then you get another credit card, then your average age of accounts is going to go down a bit, just because the average age of all your accounts is calculated in your score. Again, you really can't do anything about this except just wait, right? Let time pass, and over time, over the long term, you're going to get a higher score. Once you reach kind of a more intermediate status of having credit cards, maybe you have a couple, maybe you've had them for maybe 2 to 3 years, then I would suggest getting rid of any cards you don't really use. Any credit cards that you close will continue to stay on your account for 7 to 10 years and also will continue aging. And so they'll not only continue benefiting your account, but they're going to stay on your report. And as long as you paid them on time, they're going to look good and help your score overall and your overall credit profile. All right, so the fourth part of what makes up your credit score is your credit mix. So this is going to be 10% of your score, and essentially this is just the different types of credit that you have. So credit cards and loans are the two main ones that most people have. Some people have student loans, car loans, home loans, like I mentioned before. Essentially, the more different types of credit that you have, the more that this will help your score. If you only have a bunch of credit cards, it just means that you're not going to be able to maximize how much this credit mix component is going to help your score right now. And the final part of what makes up your credit score is going to be what's called new inquiries. So an inquiry is when someone looks at your credit score. It's also known as a credit pull. There are essentially two types of pulls. There are soft pulls, which are credit checks that do not affect your score. This is usually for like credit card pre-approvals, background checks, or loan eligibility checking. And then there are hard pulls, which are essentially credit checks that do affect your score. And again, usually if you're applying for a credit card, it'll usually be a soft pull to just see if you're approved. And then once you're ready to actually obtain the card, then it'll be a hard pull. Now, soft pulls do not go on your credit report, but hard pulls stay on your report for 2 years. So that is just something to keep in mind when applying for new lines of credit. One of the most common questions that I get asked is, how many points can I expect to lose when I do get a hard pull on my account? Now, there's no way for anyone to tell exactly how many points you're going to lose, but just know that it's not going to be a huge amount, and it really shouldn't be any amount that you should be worrying about over the course of, months to years. I think the most that I've seen it go down is 10 points, which I think in the grand scheme of things, unless you're at a really low credit score already, or you're planning to apply for something within the next year, then I really don't think you have to worry about any hard pulls. So now that you know everything that makes up your credit score, we can actually look into how to build your credit score. So to build your credit score, pay on time and in full. That's really it. That's all you have to do. So look, are there ways to maximize how fast you can build your credit? Yes, but if you want like a one sentence answer, then that's really all it is. To get a good score, you need to pay your statements before they are due, and you have to pay them entirely so you don't carry any balances. And as we've mentioned, because payment history and history length make up a combined 50% of your score, then as long as you're just having credit cards, paying them on time, and keeping open their accounts, you're going to continue to build your credit score. And because utilization is 30% of your score, which is also temporary, you really don't have to worry about your utilization unless you're planning on applying for new lines of credit or pretty much doing anything with your credit score within the next few months. And when that time comes, all you have to do is drop down your utilization to maybe 1 to 10%, and you'll see the highest your score can be. Now, I decided to make this next part its own section just because I really want to hammer it home the difference between your statement dates and your statement due dates, when to pay on time, and when not to pay your credit card. So the most common mistake that I see with people entering into the credit card space is they have no idea when to pay their card, or they're just paying it completely wrong. So you know what statements are, right? They take a snapshot of everything that you've done on your card, and it's basically posted and sent to the credit bureaus to make your credit score. Now, your statement due date is when your statement number is due. So from, let's say, December 20th, in the example from before, from December 20th to January 20th, I spent $100, right? Those $100 are then going to be due about 1 month after my statement close date. And so a common misconception is that, shoot, I've spent this money from December 20th to January 20th, which means I need to pay it off as soon as my statement posts. So using that same example, on January 20th, my statement is going to close. And then on January 21st, my statement is going to post, and I'm going to be able to pay that statement balance, and I'm going to have a month to do so. So the biggest misconception is that you either have to pay it before the statement closes, or that you have to pay it the day after, or you don't really have that much time to pay it off. The truth is you have a month after your statement closes to pay off your statement balance. And so if I wanted to, I could pay my January statement on January 22nd. I could pay it on February 1st. I could pay it all the way up until the actual statement due date, which is usually about a month after your statement closes. So I'll just use February 21st for this example. So if I wanted to, I could wait till the very last day, February 21st, to pay my January statement. Obviously, I don't recommend that. Assuming you actually have the money to pay your statement, I think the absolute latest that you should be waiting is maybe like a day before your statement is due, just because you want to account for any issues that you might encounter on the website, or maybe just the credit card issuer in general. Now, another question that I get is, what if I decide to pay my credit card before the statement post? Now, this is really important because there are going to be times that you want to report low utilization, and there's a really easy way around that. Like I said, using the example before, if I spent $100 and I wanted to lower my utilization, what I could do is I could pay $90 out of the 100, and what will be left over is $10, right? And so when my statement closes, the only thing that's going to show on my statement is the $10 that is left over. It's not going to show that, I still have $100 due in a month. The $10 that's going to be left over is going to be what's due in a month. It's still going to show all the charges that I made, but it's going to show any payments that I made before the statement close date as well. And so if you ever really need a low utilization fast, like within your next statement, all you have to do is pay down your card right before your statement closes to whatever percentage of utilization that you want, and then you'll see it posted on your statement. Now, the last thing you really need to know about statements is that you never really want to pay off your entire card before the statement closes. This is because if you report zero utilization, or in other words, if you just pay off your entire card before the statement closes, it's going to report as if you didn't even use your card. And having no utilization on your card is actually going to hurt your score in the long run. And you also just don't really want to risk credit card issuers closing your account for inactivity. So now that you know the difference between statement due dates, statement close dates, and how to pay your card on time, we can go into the next part, which is going to be how many cards should you have in the different types of cards. So I've basically categorized credit cards into 3 different categories. There's going to be beginner cards, intermediate cards, and then advanced cards. So beginner cards are cards that require either no credit score or a very low score to apply and get approved. These cards also do not have any annual fees, and so you can keep them open long term without any repercussions really. These cards will usually be pretty friendly for new users, and the rewards or cashback that you get out of them will be pretty simple, anywhere from like 1 to 2%. It won't be anything complicated. Those are the types of cards that I would see as beginner cards. Intermediate cards are cards that require some kind of score requirement. I usually think anything above Fair Plus that's required to open them. Intermediate cards are also where you begin to start seeing annual fees to keep the card open. And so anywhere from $25 to $100 is usually the range for intermediate cards. This is also where you'll start seeing cards offer kind of pretty big sign-up bonuses. And essentially how the sign-up bonuses work is as long as you spend a certain amount in a certain amount of time, so let's say $5,000 in 6 months, the credit card issuer will give you a certain amount of points. Credit card issuers will also usually give you access to travel portals at this stage. I know the Sapphire Preferred does. And then for the advanced section, these are just cards that you generally need a really good score to be approved for. The Chase Sapphire Reserved is a good example, the Amex Platinum. The annual fees in the advanced section are generally above $100. And these cards usually offer huge sign-up bonuses. Like I'm talking in the hundreds of thousands of points. They usually also offer monthly credit, maybe like $10 on DoorDash or on Uber Eats or something. And the reason why we begin to categorize these cards is because it makes it a lot easier to look at them through this lens down the line. When you're trying to establish where you should put a card, you know, if you're trying to rebuild your credit, you probably shouldn't be getting a card with an annual fee on it. And if you're getting your first credit card, you absolutely should not be getting a card with an annual fee. A lot of people also just generally tend to spend a lot in one or two categories, whether that means gas, groceries, maybe streaming services, or maybe just general shopping. It also just kind of puts it into perspective which cards you can realistically apply for and expect to get approved. And so if you're kind of in your beginner stages of building your credit score and you maybe have 1 to 2 cards, then applying for an intermediate card is actually pretty viable. And a lot of times you could be shooting yourself in the foot by starting off with a really bad, or I guess you could say difficult card to maintain. And so start thinking about what do you spend the most on and which credit cards cover those categories, and how can you set yourself up to obtain those cards in a certain timeline. So I had originally planned on this part of the video being for determining what should someone's first credit card be, but I ultimately have decided to make that into an entirely separate video just because there's a lot of information that I feel like I can pack into that. If by the time this video comes out, I have already published another video about what should your first credit card be, then I'll put that on the screen. However, if I haven't, just know that that is going to be coming in the future. Shifting focus, we're going to be talking about some common myths and mistakes when dealing with credit cards. So I'm going to list off some of the most common myths that I hear or read online. So the first myth is that you need to carry debt in order to build your credit score. The reason why this is completely wrong is just remember that payment history is 35% of your FICO score. And so carrying any debt or not paying back any payment is going to hurt your score. Anytime you don't make a payment on time or you carry debt or carry a balance, you're not paying back money that you have spent. And so as a result, your score will go down. The next most common myth is that closing credit cards will help your score. Always remember that a part of your score is your credit age or your credit history, right? And so the longer you hold credit cards, the longer that becomes. This is why you never close your first credit card, because that encompasses almost your entire history. And so closing your first credit card, which has the longest history, is going to end up really damaging your score. What I will say to that though, is that you can close cards that you either don't want, don't use, or just don't really look at. The reason why is because once you're a bit later into your credit card profile, and let's say you have maybe 2 to 3, maybe 4 credit cards, then closing cards that you don't use can be beneficial, because not only are you just adding more work for you to do to, manage the cards and make sure you're paying things on time, managing all those dates, closing cards in that instance can be beneficial. But overall, for your credit score to increase, you need to have some lines of credit. And so closing your main credit cards, closing ones that you've had for a very long time, will never help your score. score. The next one is that utilization permanently hurts your score. Utilization is temporary, meaning that every single statement, your utilization is going to be recalculated. If you want to see your highest score, then keep your utilization between 1 and 10%. And the last myth is that credit cards have no benefits outside of cashback. So I mentioned previously that they offer fraud protection in case of anyone stealing your card information. You can use a credit card's funds for emergencies, right? In case you don't have that cash with you at the moment. Credit cards are great for overall credit building, right? Building your credit that you're going to have to eventually need to, get a house, get cars, all those type of things. And finally, credit cards offer access to transfer partners. And so even if you don't like using credit cards, inevitably there is going to be a transfer partner, whether it be a hotel, maybe a certain airline, or just a certain company that you really enjoy using their products from. Credit cards will almost always have one company that you really like and can transfer points to, and then get some kind of other benefit outside of just pure cash. Now, outside of myths, I did want to state a couple mistakes that people make when applying for credit cards or just getting started in their credit card journey. The first one is treating their limit like it's their own money. Just keep reminding yourself that at the end of the day, you are borrowing a credit card issuer's money. It is not yours, and that at the end of the day, you're going to need to pay it back. As simple as it is, that is something that a lot of people struggle to get over, and that even I had a lot of difficulty with when I first started using my credit card. I mean, I would just go and spend money sometimes and not even look at my credit card statement, just because I would always forget that that money is actually going to eventually come out of my own account. The second mistake is opening too many cards too fast. A lot of people get their first credit card, maybe their second, and they think, shoot, like I have a good score, like I might as well get a bunch of sign-up bonuses. And don't get me wrong, take advantage of those sign-up bonuses, but remember that opening too many cards too fast opens up the possibility of you overspending and also just misusing your cards in general. Every time you get a new card, you also got to remember that it is going to be a hard pull on your account, and so other credit card issuers are going to see that later on. The third mistake is not knowing why you're getting another card. I think it's very important to know why you're going to get another card, whether it be for the sign-up bonus, whether it be for the category of cashback. Maybe you really like the system and you're working towards like a trifecta. The Chase trifecta is a very common 3 cards that people get. And the next mistake is paying only the minimum payment. Please remember that the minimum payment is a trap set by the credit card companies to essentially lock you into carrying balances. Don't get me wrong, if you pay the minimum payment, you won't have to pay a late fee. However, that doesn't get rid of the fact that you are carrying a balance every single statement. And the last mistake that I'm going to mention is maxing out cards. I really don't think you should get in the habit of maxing out any of your credit cards. The only exception that I can really think for this is that if you have a big purchase coming up and you know you have the funds for it, then obviously maxing out your credit card for that short term, for that short period, when you know you're going to pay it back is totally fine. So those are some common myths and mistakes that people encounter when getting into the credit card game. And that is pretty much everything that I believe that a beginner needs to get started with credit cards. I also do just want to mention that this is a beginner's guide, and so there is a good amount of stuff that I did leave out just for the sake of it not being like an hour-long video. I do eventually want to make like an intermediate or maybe like an advanced guide for people for credit cards that you can watch after this video. But for the most part, everything that I've mentioned in this video is everything that you're going to need to get started, whether that's earning rewards and cashback or building your credit score in general. I also just wanted to plug that I do have a guide that I have made that I have been following for this video. The guide is only $5, but it goes over everything that I went over in this video and even more, including churning and also just recommendations for first cards. And so if you enjoyed the content in this video and you feel like supporting the channel, then definitely check it out. I'll also be plugging anybody who ends up buying my ebook at the end of my videos in the future. And if you have any specific questions that you feel like I didn't answer in this video, you can also just feel free to send me an email. I've put a lot of time and energy into this video, and so I really hope it helps someone out there on their credit card journey. So thank you guys so much for watching. Definitely make sure to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.